Welcome to the intermediate level of astrology for GAN traders. My name's Olga Morales. Now, this first lesson I've called WD GAN's Time and Seasons, what every trader should know. As I've developed these lessons to be progressive, my assumption is that you are not a complete beginner and therefore have some basic understanding of astrological principles. If not, I recommend that you complete my beginner's course so that you have a thorough foundation from which to move forward. I will also not tone down the lessons and repeat concepts I introduced in the beginner's course. Rather, I'll extend on them and even provide more information. I hope you enjoy these lessons and on its completion have a better understanding of GAN's time and seasons. My copyright slide. No part of this DVD may be reproduced or used in any form without my consent. And my disclaimer, all charts and analysis are purely for educational purposes and do not intend to provide trading advice or recommendations. Past performances is no guarantee of future performances. Let's have a look again. Newspaper articles in the 1920s actually called W.D. Gann a prophet and a mathematical seer. To quote, "Mr. Gann has made noteworthy forecasts of the markets, which proved to be true in the course of time. His calculations are based on letters, numbers, and astrology," and that's from the Journal of Commerce in 1921. Another one, "Mr. Gann gets calls every day from men and women prominent in all walks of life, asking him to cast their horoscope. He tells politicians whether or not they will be elected and solves other problems for clergymen, bankers and statesmen." That's from the Evening Telegram in 1923. Now on the slide is a copy of one of Gann's forecasts that he provided in his newsletters, his annual forecast, which was actually sent out on the 30th of November 1921. The heavy line shows his forecast against the actual dotted line, which was the Dow Jones averages. The forecast actually called for three tops. The first one was in April, the second one in August, and then the final top was in October. And from then he spoke about under the month of November, the forecast read the 10th and the 14th, a panicky break, which was fulfilled with remarkable accuracy. So there you go, that's what Gann was providing for his clients, one example of. Now this comes from a page in Tunnel Through the Air, which is very important, page 78, and Gann talks about how do I forecast future cycles. To quote him, "Time is a great factor that proves all things. The measurement of time first originated and is based on the Earth's motion upon its axis. One of the smallest cycles or time factors which repeats regularly in things that are very active and have a high vibration is a 4-minute cycle. The reason for this is that the Earth moves 1 degree every 4 minutes. The next cycle is 24 hours, the complete time required for the Earth to make one revolution upon its axis. This is how man measured his cycle of a day. The next important cycle is 1 year, the time required for the Earth to move around the sun. This brings about the 4 seasons of the year. These are the minor cycles." Now we're going to be focusing on this time in this lesson. That's what it's all about. The 4-minute animation is in the beginner's level, which I will not repeat. So if you want to have a look at it, you need to go back and have a look in your beginner's level. And we're going to actually look at the 24 hours in this level. And 24 hours, when we multiply 24 hours by 60 minutes in a day, we actually get 1,440 minutes per day. Now that number is very important when it comes to people who trade daily or intraday. You're looking at how many minutes there are in a total day. Now when we multiply 1,440 minutes times 60 seconds, we actually get in one day 86,400 seconds per day. Now when we multiply the minutes of a whole day, which is 1,440 times 360 times 4. That's how many minutes we have in a day. So there's 4 revolutions of 360 in that total amount of minutes in a day. So in a year, when we multiply it by 360, we actually get 518,400 minutes in 1 year. Now that number is really important. If you have a look at the pyramid that I've mentioned in beginner's lesson, and there's lots of things using those big numbers. If we take away the zeros, which people do often, doesn't really mean anything. Zeros don't mean anything. You start seeing important numbers in these multiplications. Now, actually, the 518,400 is actually 720 squared. So again, that is important, that number, and it's got a lot to do with also the precession of the equinoxes that I've mentioned in the beginner's course. So I'll extend on that. Now, when we divide 360 of the wheel by 24 hours, we get 15 degrees. So actually 1 hour equals 15 degrees. And we'll see why this is important when if anyone, I'm sure some of you have probably seen Gann's wheel of 24, which is essentially the 24 hours in the day. So we start symbolically at 0, which is like, we'll get into it a bit more, which is 0 Aries. And that is like the 6 o'clock in the morning. If you remember in our beginner's course, we went through this. And so that's our rising point. And then every 15, see these little segments in here, at 15, we start another hour. And then at 30, we start another hour. And then at 45, we start another hour. So by dividing that circle of 360, which represents the day, by 24 hours, you're going to get 15 degree segments in the day. That 15 degrees equals 1 hour. So it becomes important when you're looking at how Gann was getting prices, which is what he was doing, in prices within here, according to the time of the day. So if you're starting at 0 around 6 o'clock, depending on the time of year, remember, it's going to change, and we'll go into it more. If the sun's rising approximately at 6 o'clock in the morning, I suppose we all start trading at around, depending where we are, between 9 and 10. So we're looking at this zone here. Now, I haven't put any planets around here. I'm just showing the hours. Now, each planetary hour is controlled by a planet. They had planetary rulers. So that's why all these segments are coloured in specific colours. The ones that are the same colours have the same planetary ruler. So you can get into really sophisticated ways of trading using astrology, which we'll get into a little bit later, maybe probably more in advanced levels. But for now, understanding that we are every 24 hours, how it works around the clock. So at 12, and there's 6 hours in the quarter. And then again at 6 p.m. we've got another 6 hours, and to midnight we've got another 6 hours. So there's 6 hours in each quarter of the day. And that is symbolic again of on a yearly basis, again talks about a year, we've got the 4 seasons in the year, but we also have symbolically 4 seasons each day, representing the 4 segments or the 4 quarters, which is actually every 6 hours approximately, depending on the time of year, because that changes. Okay. Okay, let's have a look at the 4 seasons now. We've touched a little bit of this in the beginner's level. We'll just have a look at a bit more depth now. We can see from this slide that I've put together the apparently yearly pathway of the sun in the sky is known as the ecliptic or the zodiac. And the ecliptic may be defined as also the projection of the plane of the Earth's orbit onto the celestial sphere. Because our Earth, remember, is tilted to 23.5 degrees, the angle between these two, like the ecliptic and the equator, also separates at that point, is also 23.5 degrees. Now, these two lines, the ecliptic and the celestial equator, join at 2 points, or they intersect at 2 points known as the equinox points, one in March when it goes into Aries, which is in March 21st, and then another one when we get into Libra, 0 degrees Libra, which is around 23rd of September. So you can see these points, and also their greatest separation here, you can see here, the distance between the ecliptic and the celestial equator is known as declination, and is the basis of what is called antitia and parallels of declination, which we will talk about in future lessons. So this is what we're looking at. Now, the amazing thing, think about this, if the Earth were not tilted to this 20.3 degrees, we would have no seasons, because the sun would always be overhead at the equator, providing an eternal equinox. So there'd be no seasons. The cycles of life that we've mutated to would be completely different. There would be an eternal equinox. That would mean that the days and nights would always have equal length, not just at the equinoxes. So, there's amazing things when you think about it. And the theory is that our Earth was knocked on that axis when there was a major catastrophe. People believe some sort of meteorite or something had happened to us, and it's tilted our axis. Now, the equinox, the word equinox comes from the Greek word equi, which is equal, and nox, night. So we get equal day and night hours. So at these points, the poles are not tilted towards or away from the sun. So the day lengths on both of these days, regardless of latitude, are exactly 12 hours. So this is where we get the equinox, equal. So you can see where the words come from. Against the solstice. Now the solstice is when the sun is actually at its lowest or highest point, where there's that big separation, and we comes from the Latin sol, which is a sun, and cistus, which is stand. So the sun hovers or stands still for 3 days. This is where we get 3 days and nights standing still. So the June solstice and the December solstice. Now on the June 21 to 22, the Earth is positioned in its orbit so that the North Pole is leaning 23.5 degrees towards the sun. During the June solstice, locations north of the equator have their longest day in summer, while all locations south of the equator have their shortest day lengths in winter. On the reverse, December 21 or 22, the Earth is positioned so that the South Pole is leaning 23.5 degrees towards the sun. During the December solstice, locations north of the equator have their shortest day lengths in winter, while all locations south of the equator have their longest days lengths in summer. So here we, talking about the northern and southern hemispheres is where we get a lot of, I suppose people get confused of what's going on. So when we're trying to find clues in the Bible that Gann's talking about the Bible, we've got to remember that it's all northern latitude. So the symbolism has to do with the northern latitudes, and the northern hemispheres, not the southern. So I tend to stick to that only because there are clues in Tunnel Through the Air and so forth that are not, you're not going to find them if you're thinking about being in the southern hemisphere. So let's have a look at here. Again, this picture that I've put together, again, is focused on a northern hemisphere symbolism. So we have the east. This is the point where the sun rises every day. And again, it's symbolic of the spring equinox. And the sun at this point starts rising to its most northern declination when it gets into the summer solstice, which it gets into Cancer at 0 degrees Cancer. So this is the highest declination of the sun, again, in the northern hemisphere. It stands still approximately 3 days before it starts coming down again. And when it starts coming down, the next 3 months, we get the sun declining, and we get it symbolically. This is the western point, which is the sunset, and we get the autumn equinox. And this is where the sun gets into Libra. It's called the sign of fall, the fall of man into the state of darkness through into the underworld. The fall, it's not just the fall of the leaves coming off the trees. It's also because the sun has fallen into its under the equinox, the and getting lower into its declination. So the sun is falling to its lowest declination, and the decline of the sun brings darkness and death into the sign of Scorpio. So once we get into that 8th house, if you remember in our beginners course I've spoken to you before, we start getting a lot of death, things start dying, there's not enough sun, and that's why the sign of Scorpio is related to death. Okay, things are dying in that season. But the lowest point becomes when we get to the lowest declination, when we hit 0 Capricorn, and that's our winter solstice in December. And again, here is the lowest point that the sun reaches. And this is, again, it rests for approximately 3 days. It stands still at its lowest point when again it starts. So the sun dies for 3 days at the winter solstice to be reborn again as it starts its journey northward again. So at that point, we celebrate Christmas. The Saviour is born, which is the sun, again on its pathway around the year, begins to make its ascension again into the spring equinox. So it's growing in length, and they were waiting for their Saviour to bring more light so that things would grow in the earth, and that's what they were waiting for. The sun was their Saviour. So this is our 4 seasons. We have the equinox, the spring equinox, the summer solstice in Cancer, the autumn equinox in Libra, and then the winter solstice in Capricorn in the winter season. Again, I'm talking about the northern hemisphere, so we have to actually change all that for the southern hemisphere because we have the opposite seasons. Now, this is again looking back at the Wheel of 24. Instead of when I showed you the 24 hours that we could use this wheel in the day, now we're using it to represent the actual year. So again, had both the year, the yearly representation of the dial, and also on the daily basis you can have the same information. So let's have a look at here. We start, the east is always the 21st of March, and that's that 0 Aries. When we get to 90 degrees, it's the 21st of June. That's our north point. When we get to the 23rd of September, it's west, and that is when we get into Libra, which represents 180 degrees. And again, when we get to 270 degrees, that's our around the 22nd of December, is 0 Capricorn. So they are our 4 cardinal points, if you remember from our beginners lessons, and they are the most important angles in our charts, if you recall, and also in terms of the seasons. They're called the cardinal ingress points, and again has a cardinal square and a fixed square, which we'll get into. And this is where we get a lot of information about our cycles, and also astrologers use ingress charts at these points, which means that at each of these points they cast a chart which will represent the whole quarter. And the first one being the Aries ingress chart is supposed to represent the whole year, and they would use that for forecasting, especially for weather forecasting. It's very important for doing mundane forecasting. The seasonal time periods. This is a quote from W.D. Gann's commodity course. In figuring seasonal time periods, we do not start calculating time from January 1st, but calculate time periods from the date when the spring season starts on March 21st. The 4 seasons in the year are the 21st of March, the 21st of June, 23rd of September, and the 22nd of December. Now let's have a look again just at the 4 seasons in the northern hemisphere. So the spring equinox starts on the 21st of March, and the sun is at 0 degrees Aries. The summer solstice is the 21st of June, and the sun is in 0 degrees of Cancer. The autumn equinox, the 23rd of September, and the sun is in 0 degrees of Libra. And the winter solstice, the 23rd of December, and the sun is in 0 degrees Capricorn. Now let's have a look at how it looks in the southern hemisphere. On the 21st of March, it's actually the autumn equinox in the southern hemisphere, but the sun is still in 0 degrees of Aries, so this is our autumn. the winter. 21st of June is the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, and the sun is in 0 degrees of Cancer. The spring equinox is the 23rd of September, when the sun is in Libra. So our spring is in September. And our summer is a summer solstice, is the 23rd of December, when the sun is in Capricorn. So everything is opposite. Now let's have a look at the dates. The sun's annual cycle. Again, using Gans seasonal. I've highlighted the seasons in blue, and they're called the ingress, again, into cardinal signs. Now I'm stressing this because it needs to be something that becomes ingrained when you're doing Gans work. So let's have a look. When the sun is in Aries, it's the 21st of March. The sun in Cancer, 21st of June. The sun in Libra, 23rd of September. And the sun in Capricorn, the 22nd of December. So this is all next year, or this year, 2010. And they are the sun's ingress into the cardinal sign. So remember, our cardinal square are the season points. Now, remember when we had a look at the diagram, let's have a look at it here on this graphic ephemeris. It's basically the declination of the sun. Having a look at it. Now, the 0 point is actually the equator. If you remember, the equator, where they intersect is the ecliptic and the celestial equator, the two hinges, when the sun is in Aries and when the sun is in Libra. And we go up to have a look at what date. We've got March 21st on this line and the 23rd of September here. Now you can see that we have the southern declination here at minus 23.5, which is the Tropic of Capricorn. And then plus northern declinations, the highest point is 23.5, and that's the Tropic of Cancer. When you're looking at a world map, when the Tropic of Cancer, that means that any place at that latitude on the 21st of June, the sun will be directly overhead at that point. There will be no shadow. So that's why that's that Tropic of Cancer. Now, these are again showing the declination of the sun. So again, going from its lowest declination up to its highest declination in the summer point, and then down again, Capricorn, which is a winter point, and we've got the 22nd of December. So that's how it looks on this swing, and that's a swing pretty much that the sun does, growing and declining. So it's ascension and descension of the sun, causing the seasons because of the tilt of the earth. Now, Gan was very important for you to put these seasons on your charts. This is the annual cycle. There's about 4 overlapping ones using timing solution, which actually gets a composite of annual cycles and puts them onto one sort of chart, so you can see an overall feel for what the sun does. And here on the bottom I've put every time the sun moves 30 degrees into a new zodiac sign, but I've actually highlighted just the cardinal points, which is Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn. So they're his seasonal points, and often the market will turn on that point, and they're divided by 90 degrees of solar movement. So you can see how he would put those points on every chart as a seasonal point for you to be looking at. We're going to look at the sun's declination using this very smart animation tool. Here we have the Earth in the center and we have the sun. Now the date for this is our first point, which is the 21st of March 2009, and here we have the sun at 0 longitude, which is 0 Aries, and 0 declination. And let's have a look at what that means. 0 declination means that the sun is actually on the equator at that point. So you can see that it's lining up with the celestial equator of the Earth. And so it's at the equinox point, that's what it means. Remember, that's the point where the two circles intersect, and that's 0 declination. And let's have a look when we move 3 months away and we go to the 21st of June. 21st of June being when the sun goes into 0 degrees of Cancer, and it's at 90 degrees, and it's at its highest declination, which is 23. Now, let's have a look at what it looks like now. You can actually see the sun's at that point. It's actually in its highest declinations, which is at 23.5 degrees. So you can see how the sun is up at the top there. Now let's bring it down again, and we're going to move another 90 degrees. And we'll go to September 21. Might be a little bit later there. We'll put it at 23. And it should be at almost 180 on that day. Because I've got it set for 12 o'clock. It's not exactly at the ingress point, but it's in that day that we have it. So we have the sun at 180 degrees, which is 0 Libra. And again, it has 0 declination. So it's again, if we have a look at it, it's on the equator. So we can see that. Now let's have a look at that last point when it gets into the next point. We go to December 22. And again, we got the sun at almost 270 and its lowest declination, so it's minus 23.5. Now let's have a look what that looks like. You can see that it's right down south from the equator, whereas at the summer solstice in Cancer it was up north declination. So that's the swings of the sun in terms of the seasons. And again, we go back to another 3 months and we get to March again, and again it's on the 0 degrees of Aries, and it's on the equator again when there's equal days and nights. So that's a very smart animation to help you understand the concept of what's happening and why the 4 seasons are so important. Essentially, they are 90 degrees apart on this wheel, and we can use that concept also of 90-degree increments from any high or low, which I will get into later as well. Let's now have a look at elliptical time and what this means in our Gann analysis. Kepler's second law. A planet moves faster as it gets closer to the sun. He found that planetary orbits are elliptical in nature and not perfect circles. Therefore, the distance between the Earth and the sun varies over the course of the year. So what I've done here is I created a daily ephemeris with the Earth's speed from the 1st of January for 1 year. And we can see, and then I've imported into Excel, and we can see the curve of its overall speed and curve in that year. So around the 4th of January each year, it's its highest speed, which is 1.019 degrees per day. Now this is called the perihelion point, which is when the Earth is closest to the sun, and therefore its speed is its fastest. And then it slowly decreases as the year progresses, and around the 4th of July, it reaches its lowest speed, which is 0.95333 degrees per day. And this is called its aphelion point, when the Earth is farthest from the sun. And then again it starts increasing in speed. Now often an average is used in astrological work like solar arc and directions, and that was 0.59 degrees per day. So you can see how there's a change. This variation is very important in terms of whether we use calendar days or solar degrees, which I'll explain a little bit more. Now let's have a look at here. What I've done is I've put in the dates in blue of the 4 cardinal points that we've been discussing, or the seasons, and that's the sun's ingress into the cardinal signs. Now let's have a look at the difference in terms of, now we know from the 21st of March to the 21st of June, the sun astrologically has moved 90 degrees because that's the quarter of a circle. But have a look in terms of calendar days. When we calculate these days, it's actually 92 days. So there's a difference there of 2 days. And have a look at this one also, the 21st of June to the 23rd of September. We know the sun has moved again another quarter, which is 90 degrees. However, in terms of calendar days, it actually takes 94 days. Now this one whole period here, which is 180 degrees from equinox to equinox, actually in terms of calendar days, takes 186 days. So there's a difference of 6 days in that period. Now, if we compare the next 90 degrees here, it's actually now takes a shorter time. It's only 89 calendar days. And again, for the next period, when it goes into again into March, it does a whole revolution, is only 89 days. And that those two periods, this second half is actually 178 calendar days. So you can see the difference. Now, why this is important, if we want to do accurate Gann counts and squaring of time and price, we have to work out, are we going to actually use calendar days, or are we going to be using solar degrees? Now, my preference obviously is solar degrees. We're actually using the sun, how long it takes the sun to do the 90 degrees. Okay, let's refresh our memory on the Gann's emblem and what it's all about. And Gann's quote is, "Within a circle is a square and a triangle." So here's our circle, there's our square, and again our triangle. Now what we're going to focus on here is what this square represents, which we did cover in the beginner's course, and I'm just going to go over it a little bit more, and we're going to find out what is at the point, at each one of the points of these corners. So we always start, as Gann said, our season starts on the 21st, our year, the 21st of March, which was a spring equinox, and the sun is at 0 Aries. So that's one point of that square. The next point is at 0 Cancer, or 90 degrees, which is a Cancer ingress at the 21st of June. The next one is a Libra ingress of the sun on the 23rd of September, and the sun is at 0 Libra. And the next corner is when it's a Capricorn ingress of the sun on the 22nd of December, and the sun is at 0 Capricorn. So that is our square. So that's the square within the circle, and you can see the 4 cardinal points: Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So this is called our cardinal, square, and cross. Now, why these are important? Because they're the 4 seasons. So I hope you've got that and understood that. Now, why this is important, and I'm stressing it, is because when we plot this on a 90-degree wheel, we need to know these divisions quite well. Now, let's have a look at if we look at the dial in terms of 360 degrees, which is called absolute longitude. 0 Aries is obviously we start at 0 counting, and when we get to Cancer, the actual degree is 90. So 0 Cancer means 90 degrees. When we move another 90 and we get to 0 Libra, it's 180 degrees. When we get to the next 90, we add and we get to 270 degrees, which is 0 Capricorn, it actually equals 270 degrees. And then another 90, we go back and we get to 360 or 0. Now 0, 90, 180 and 270 again are our cardinal degrees. Now just remember those numbers, because what happens is, imagine if I took those 4 quarters and overlapped them on one chart, and that's exactly what cosmobiologists do. We overlap there's 4 quarters onto one chart, so those 4 points become 0, and I'll explain that now. So this is what I use, because I'm also a cosmobiologist, is we again overlap the 4 quarters. So what I've done here is I've got all the cardinal ingresses. So I've got Aries ingress on March, I've got the June one, the Libran one, and the Capricorn one, and I've overlapped them, so I've got 4. It's a quad wheel, 4 charts on one, and I've just put the sun in to make it easy to see, and no other planets. Now, can you see what happens? They're all lined up at 0. So technically those points, because they all are 90 degrees, overlapping them, they all end up on this axis, on the 0 axis. So all this part from 0 to 30 degrees is our cardinal signs, so which Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. From 30 to 60 degrees is all the fixed signs, which is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And from 60 again to the 90 is the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. But you can see how they all line up here. Now let's have a look at Gan's seasonal time periods, what are called the mid-seasons. So not only did we have the 4 quarters, he also had, when you divide the circle by 8, you get the mid-seasons. So we had the 21st of December, then we had the 5th of February, March 21st, and then we had May 5th, June 21, August 8, September 21, November 8, December 21. These seasonal time periods divide the year into 8 equal parts, approximately 45 days apart, and that's from his commodity course. Now, what are the mid-seasons? The mid-season sun is in a 15 degrees of Taurus, is on the 5th of May. So it's actually 45 degrees from 0. We get to this mid-season. The first mid-season is on the 5th of May. Now the next one is on the 8th of August when it reaches 15 degrees of Leo. Now again, remember that Taurus and Leo are the fixed signs. Now the next fixed sign is Scorpio. So the mid-season is 15 degrees of Scorpio, which is around the 8th of November. Okay. And then the last one is when the sun reaches 15 degrees of Aquarius, which is around the 4th of February. And again, we have it at 15 degrees of that sign. So these are called the mid-seasons, and they have a 45 degree increment. That's dividing the circle by 8, and it's our 8th harmonic, which gives us 45 degrees. So this is called the fixed square cross. Now these points on their own are still are still 90 degrees apart, and so they are called the fixed cross square. So they're cutting into that fixed point. Now let's have a look at what happens when these 4 points are plotted on the 90 degree wheel. After we do this slide, because what I wanted to show you here is before we start, we always start at the 0 point. And 15 Taurus actually equals 45 degrees. 15 Leo equals 135 degrees. 15 Scorpio equals 225 degrees. And 15 Aquarius equals 315 degrees. Now all those points, 45, 135, 225 and 315, actually when we plot them, they're called mid-season degrees. When we plot them on the 90 degree wheel, what happens is they all line up exactly at this point. This point here equals 15 degrees fixed, because here, from here to here is 30 degrees. We halve it, we get to 15. So all fixed, 15 fixed line up in here. Now that is exactly opposite the 0 degrees cardinal. So those 2 points are amazing. We've got the 0 in the cardinal ingresses, then we get the mid-seasons exactly across the dial. Now the reason being is that because this is a 90 degree wheel, anything across the dial has to be an increment of 45 degrees, because you essentially are halving that 90 degrees. So they're either 45, 135 and so forth. So that's how this works, and that's what's so amazing about using the the 90 degree wheel, which I tell people about. Once the first time I saw Gan's square of 9, I immediately thought of my 90 degree wheel, because there's so much you can see in this dial, especially as a beginner, because it's a very visual tool for you to help you see these planetary alignments a lot easier than having a 360 wheel with all the aspects, and it can get quite confusing. So I know that might look a little bit confusing, but all we're doing, imagine we're cutting it up, we're creating a harmonic, basically the 4th harmonic. We're overlapping 4 quarters and they all line up at the same point. Now we've reached applying Gan's time and seasons. Let's have a look at how we can use this knowledge now and plot things on our charts. Here, what I've done here is actually plotted the 4 seasons on the Dow Jones for 2008, just to have a look at these bands, colours here every time the sun moves into a cardinal point, which is Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn. So they represent our 4 seasons. And often you'll have a major turn or some sort of reaction on those dates, depending on which way the trend is going. If you're expecting a major turn and one of these dates comes up, you're going to have to be prepared for something to happen. So have a look at specifically these points. Have a look at this point here, where there was a major sort of turn pretty much on the when the sun moved into Libra, and we have a major downfall there in that year. Now often it will just keep moving through, but there will be times when you look back at these seasonal periods when they're pretty much spot on. Now I often I see it more visible in commodity charts rather than some of the stocks. Have a look at soybeans, for example, the 4 seasons. When you plot over time, you really get some sharp moves when these periods we move into these every 90 degrees into these seasonal periods more often than you do in stocks. And you just have a look at these periods and how effective they are in terms of seasonal periods. Now, we don't want to limit ourselves to just using the solstice and equinox points or our 4 seasons. What we can do is actually use the same principle and use either a major high or a major low and then apply these similar counts. So what we're doing is, for example, here I've actually started my counts from the high in October 2007, I think it was the 11th, and then I've just set it every 90 degrees from that point. So 90 solar degrees every time the sun has moved exactly 90 degrees from where it was from that point. This puts a line there for me, so I know that that is exactly 90 solar degrees. So that for me, as an astrologer, that is a square of the sun. So you're getting 90 degrees or a quarter, and we just keep going every that. And Gan always says to expect when anything's moved 3 points from itself, expect a changing trend. Now three meaning 3 times 30 degrees, so it's 3 signs, and that equals 90 degrees. So you can have a look at that. I think it's some of the turns are spot on, and when you can see them every 90 degrees, it's essentially the sun squaring itself. So we know that that period is important in terms of astrological cycles. Now again, we can add a harmonic of that, and we want to look divide the 90 even further, and we halve that and we go to the 45 degrees, which is our 8th harmonic. And you'll see even a even clearer pattern here is that, again, I'm starting from October high, and I've just moved every 45 solar degrees from that point. So we're actually applying Gan's concept, but we're not starting from the 21st of March. We're using the same concept and starting from a major high and just doing our 45 degrees, and you can see how often a lot of those turns have happened exactly at that 45 degree period. So I hope you're understanding the difference between not essentially always starting at our seasonal points, even though they're important. We now are applying 90 degrees and 45 degrees from any high or low in your charts and just plotting them. And the more you do this, the more you'll find you'll start getting confident with these 45 degrees. Now, if you're expecting some sort of change, or you've got some sort of another indicator on your chart that's either overbought or oversold, and you've got a 45-day count coming up, well, you can start getting more confidence in making decisions whether to buy or sell. Now here, again, I've actually plotted these 45 solar degrees on wheat, and I've actually used a low here, a major low in December, and then again just plotted 45 solar degrees from that point. And you'll see sometimes it's not exact, it'll be earlier, but often it's exactly on that point we get a major turn, and these are things that we need to plot. So it's amazing when you start putting the 45 degrees on your charts. Now this is on coffee. I started my 45. Now this is going way back. I got a real major low on the 22nd of October 2001, and this is spot coffee, and I've continued it. I didn't put it all on this chart just to not make it so cluttered, but it's a continuation from that date and into the recent period. So you can see it's ongoing. You can plot these things from major lows from years back and just keep projecting them out, and they still work. So it's amazing how it all works. Now again, also had increments of 30 degrees, so we're using a 12th harmonic, and then we get into the 60 degrees, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 330, and 360 days or degrees from any important top or bottom. That's from his commodity course. And so what I've done here, I've actually put it on gold, 30 solar degrees from a low, and from a high, and just keeps going out every 30 degrees. These are solar degrees, just to have a look at what's happening, and you can see some amazing patterns. So you might find that whatever you're studying, stock or commodity, that may have better results using increments of 30 degrees, or you might find it has more the 4th and 8th harmonic, and it's just experimentation and what your stock, I suppose Gann called it the vibration of the stock, that you find that what period is better suited for your particular thing that you're interested in. So it's really just trial and error and just having a look at how it all works. Okay, now we've reached a point where we're going to extend on the time counts to include something called sensitive degrees on the S&P. We go back to the time by solar degrees, which is a 45 degrees on the Dow Jones. Remember, we took it from the October high on the 11th of October and just projected 45 degree solar degree counts from that point. Now, let's have a look at what I've done here. I know it might look a little bit confusing. Again, using my dial, my 90 degree dial, I have taken 45 degree increments, 4 of them that we looked on these charts. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 dates, and I've put them on a quad wheel. So there's 4 overlapping charts. And the reason I'm doing that is we're looking at the sun, because what we're doing is we're using solar degrees. So we want to see the sun every 45 degrees from one point, moving, projecting it forward. So in the center we have the first date, which is the high, which was on October 11th, 2007, and the price was 1,576. So on that date, the sun was actually in 18 of a cardinal sign, actually 18 degrees of Libra. Now, remember, if you haven't done my beginner's course, you might be feeling a bit lost, but we really need to know the divisions of our charts for you to understand what I'm going to be presenting now. So on that date, the sun, at this point, remember this first 30 segment on this dial is all the cardinal section. And so the sun on that day was at 18 degrees. So you can see it's just before the 20s, so we're looking at 17 to 18 degrees on that day. So that's what we're interested in. Now that becomes a sensitive degree. 18 cardinal becomes a sensitive degree. Now the next point, which was 45 solar degrees later on the 25th of November, the sun again comes back. It does 45 degrees. Now remember, I said anything across the dial is going to be an increment of 45 degrees. So naturally the sun is going to be on the opposite side to where it was from our beginning. And here it is. So at that point, it's actually in the mutable section. So remember, this was the first 30 is cardinal, the second 30 is fixed, and the third is mutable. So we can see that the mutable starts at 60, 1, 2, 3. The sun at that point is on 3 mutable. So it was actually in that mutable sign there. So in Sagittarius, it was 3 degrees Sagittarius on the 25th of November. Now again, we do another 45 and on the third date, and then the sun comes back again on around the 7th of January, or the 8th of January, and it comes back and it's at 18 Capricorn. So again, Capricorn is a cardinal sign, so you can see it line up again. And then another 45 degrees, it comes back to a mutable point around the 21st of Feb, where it's actually the sun's at 3 Pisces. So you can see why this dial, in terms of GAN's 45 or 8th harmonic, is ideal in seeing these patterns. Now at the moment we're just using the sun. You can see that Venus is quite involved in these patterns too. It's in there as well. So at the moment we're just looking at solar degrees. I don't want to complicate it. I have left the other planets in just in case other people are a little bit more advanced, so they might see other patterns aligning in those 45-day counts. So what I want you to realize is that anything across the dial again is an increment of 45. Now when you look at these numbers 3 and 18, if you take away 3 from 18 you get 15. So anything across the dial, although it's 45, technically it's actually an increment of 15. You just keep adding 15 and 15, and that's why it becomes a very interesting way of seeing patterns. 15, if you remember back to the 24 hours, is when we divide the wheel by 15, we get 24 hours. So that the harmonics and the numbers work beautifully. When you get more advanced, we'll be able to see patterns a lot better. But at the moment, I'm just introducing the 90-degree wheel, which it is just a magnificent way of seeing these patterns. So let's have a look at the sun at 18 degrees on the S&P 500. So what I've done using the time solution, I've plotted every time the sun is at 18 degrees of a cardinal sign, and it's just plotted the lines for me. Now this happens to be one of the most active or sensitive points in the S&P, and you can go back into time. I've gone back to 2000, and you can go back. I didn't want to put too many charts on there, but you can see how many of these turns are on that point. So it's a very important point in the S&P. Now the other thing is also the sun at the 3 degrees mutable, and I've just plotted them as well on this chart. And I've got some zoom up charts where you can see a little bit more clearly, but you can see a lot of them are very active on those days. They're exactly on the turn is when the sun was in 3 degrees of mutable. And remember, they're always opposite on that chart. Here I have a close-up. Basically, these are 45 degrees apart, these lines. So the sun at this point would be in a cardinal sign, and then in a mutable, 3 mutable, cardinal, mutable, and it's just a pattern that continues. Now sometimes there's not a major turn, but there's always some sort of reaction on those turns if you keep looking at them, and over time it might be a couple of days out, but there's some sort of reaction on that time. It's a very sensitive point. Now obviously if there are more planets aligning with the sun at a cardinal, 18 cardinal or 3 mutable, you will see a more obvious reaction if they cluster at that point. It's just a sensitive degree. And here we have another one, 2000, the year 2007. Again, the sun at 18 cardinal and 3 mutable. So it's every 45 degrees apart. You can see it working. And here a more recent one, in 2008, again, not as obvious. Well, the reactions weren't as big in that year as previous ones, but you can see them coming in on these points. Now this is still, I haven't changed it. It's still the sun, 18 cardinal, 3 mutable, and again this year here, not as some turns are exactly on those points, and others were just a little bit earlier. So you can see how those 2 points, that axis, you want to call it, is very active in this particular S&P 500. This chart, I've actually plotted the sensitive degree dates for you for 2010 in case you find it difficult to work out how to locate these dates at this level. The dates are the 7th of January, 20th of February, 6th of April, 23rd of May, 8th of July, 25th of August, 10th of October, and the 24th of November. So keep an eye on those dates and maybe put them in your diary, and you can always refer back to this DVD. Now that brings us to the conclusion of this lesson. The software I have used is Solidify Gold, Market Analyst 6, and Timing Solution. I want to thank you, and I hope you found this lesson to be of much value. And the next lesson will focus on declination, the hidden dimension. And it was sort of, in this lesson we've learnt about the sun's declination, but each planet has a similar declination but different counts, and it becomes quite involved when you put in more planets. So I hope you join me for that one as well. It'll be available soon. And thank you again, and God bless.